Dad chose sister's recital over my college graduation. Decades later, he needs my insurance. I was still standing in a hospital lobby with my coat half off when my dad shoved his hand toward me and said, "Give me your insurance card," like he was asking for my car keys. The fluorescent lights made his skin look gray-green, the kind of sickly tone you only notice when it's someone you've known your whole life. My sister hovered behind him with her arms crossed and her lips pressed together like she was bracing for a fight she'd already decided I started. Somewhere down the corridor, a machine beeped in a steady, indifferent rhythm. The air smelled like sanitizer and stale coffee. Dad's eyes were watery, but his voice was sharp, still the same old command voice, even with a hospital wristband on. I blinked at him, slow, because my brain genuinely couldn't catch up. "What?" was all I managed, and it came out smaller than I wanted. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was being reasonable. "They said they need insurance on file before they can schedule the procedure," he hissed. "I don't have time for paperwork." "You do. You have good coverage. You always have everything together." Then, as if that solved it, he added, "So just give it to me." My sister made a sound behind him, impatient, almost disgusted. "Don't play dumb," she said. "You know what he means." And that was when I saw the receptionist glance up from her computer, eyes flicking between us with that practiced neutrality that still screams, "Please don't make this my problem." Dad's hand stayed outstretched, palm up, waiting the same way it used to wait when I was 16, and he'd hold out his hand for my pay envelope because the family needs it. Waiting the same way it did on my graduation day when he told me, "You'll understand," and drove to my sister's recital instead. I didn't pull out my wallet. I didn't move at all. I just felt heat climb up my neck and this strange, hollow calm settle in my chest. "Dad," I said, "careful. You can't use my insurance. It doesn't work like that." His eyebrows slammed together. "Yes, it does," he snapped. "They just need a number. A policy. You're my daughter." My sister stepped forward, voice getting louder like volume could bully reality into compliance. "You're really going to do this right now? He's sick. You're going to stand there and lecture him?" Dad's hand shook a little, but he didn't drop it. "I'm not asking for charity," he said, and his mouth twisted like he was already offended. "I raised you. I paid for your school. You owe me one simple thing." Something in my stomach tightened, so hard it almost made me nauseous. I stared at his wristband, at the smudged ink of his name, at the way his fingers trembled with either pain or fury, and I thought, of course this is how it happens. Of course he shows up in my life again as a demand. It was May of 2004 when he missed my college graduation, and I can still tell you exactly what the auditorium smelled like. Hairspray, cheap perfume, sweat trapped under polyester gowns, and those stale buttery popcorn kernels that get stuck in old carpet. I remember sitting in my cap and gown, knees bouncing, scanning the crowd for my dad's "Face the way you do, even when you tell yourself you don't care." I remember the empty seat I saved, front row, aisle, because he'd promised. Not hinted. Promised. Wouldn't miss it, he'd said on the phone 2 weeks earlier, like I was ridiculous for even asking. "You're my kid." I wasn't the kid who needed him to show up for every little thing. I was the kid who figured out early that asking for too much got you labeled dramatic. But graduation felt different. It was 4 years of late shifts and ramen noodles and taking the long way around campus because I couldn't afford parking. It was me doing my degree while my sister, Megan, spent her afternoons in dance studios and music lessons that Dad somehow always found money for. The morning of graduation, I called him to confirm a time. He answered on the third ring, already irritated. Yeah, he said. "I'm up." "Okay," I said, trying to sound casual even though my hand was sweaty. "Doors open at 10. It starts at." He cut me off. "Listen," he said, and his voice shifted into that tone he used when he wanted to make something sound inevitable. "We've got an issue." I knew before he even said it. My chest tightened like my body recognized the pattern before my mind wanted to. "Megan has a recital today," he said. I stared at the wall of my tiny apartment, at the cheap mirror where my cap was sitting crooked, and I said, stupidly, "Yeah, I know. It's later, isn't it?" Silence. Then the exhale, the one that meant you're being difficult. "It's at 2, he said. And her teacher moved the rehearsal earlier. It's a big deal. She's got a solo." My mouth went dry. "My ceremony is at 11, I said. It's done by 1. You can. It's across town, he snapped. Parking is a nightmare. If I miss a rehearsal, she'll fall apart. You know how she is. I didn't know how she is. Megan has always been how she is, which in our house meant her feelings were emergencies and mine were inconveniences. So you're not coming, I said, and it wasn't a question. He said, don't do that. Don't do what? Make it a thing, he said. You're older. You're mature. You get it. You don't need me sitting there clapping. You'll have your friends. I remember the way my eyes stung. Not crying yet, just that burn you get when your body is trying not to react. I want you there, I said, and it came out quiet. He sighed like I was asking for a luxury. I'll take you to dinner, he offered, like that was equivalent. We'll celebrate. But I can't let Megan down. And he hung up before I could answer, which was his favorite move. Decide. Announce. Exit. At graduation, I watched other people's parents stand on chairs for photos, waving bouquets, crying openly. I smiled for pictures with my roommates, and I kept my chin up so no one would ask where my family was. When they called my name, I walked across the stage with my heart thudding, and I swear I still glanced out at the crowd like there was a chance he'd appear the last second with that sheepish traffic was crazy grin. He didn't. Afterward, I drove alone to the recital because I told myself I wanted to support my sister anyway, because I was still trying to be the bigger person back then. I sat in the back of the auditorium while Megan danced her solo, and I watched Dad stand up and clap so hard his hands went red. He was beaming. He had flowers. He hugged her like she'd just saved the world. When Megan came off stage and saw me, she frowned. "Why are you here?" she whispered, like my presence was weird. Dad looked at me, and for a split second his expression flickered with something, guilt, maybe, but then it flattened into annoyance. "See?" he said, like he was proving a point. "This is what matters today." I drove home that night with my diploma in the passenger seat and the flowers Dad bought for Megan's solo sitting in the car because she'd left them in my back seat. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers cramped and thinking, this is it. This is how it will always be. I kept my word to myself. I built my life without him. I got a job, then a better job. I married someone who actually shows up. I had 2 kids. I learned how to make dinners that weren't boxed. I learned how to stop waiting for Dad's approval like it was oxygen. I didn't cut him off completely because I'm not made of stone and because part of me still hoped time would soften him. But I kept him at a distance where he couldn't keep disappointing me up close. Megan stayed close. Megan lived in the hometown. Megan had bad luck. Megan had hard times. Megan always had a reason why she couldn't keep a job, couldn't pay rent, couldn't manage her life without Dad stepping in. And Dad stepped in because Dad liked being needed. He liked having someone depend on him. It made him feel like the hero, even when he was creating the helplessness by enabling it. When Dad got older, he started telling everyone he was proud of me. Not directly to me, mostly to strangers and relatives. "She's doing really well," he'd say at family gatherings while I stood there holding a plate of food, and Megan would roll her eyes like my success was a personal insult. So when a hospital called me last week, I didn't rush there because I felt close to him. I rushed because he's my dad, and the words chest pain still flipped something primal in you. The nurse on the phone said he was stable but needed tests, maybe a procedure. She asked who his emergency contact was. I laughed once, bitter, because of course it was me. Megan's name was probably listed too, but she's the kind of person who lets calls go to voicemail if they feel stressful. I left work early, drove through traffic, and walked into the lobby already braced for complicated feelings. I wasn't braced for him to demand my insurance card like I was a vending machine. Back in the lobby, I took a slow breath and lowered my voice so we weren't a spectacle. "Dad," I said, "I can't just hand you my insurance. It's tied to me. It's fraud." His face tightened instantly. "Fraud," he repeated, offended. "Oh my God, listen to you. Always with the big words. I'm not asking you to rob a bank." Megan's eyes flashed. "He needs help. You're really going to hide behind rules." "It's not rules, Megan. It's law. It's how the system works." Dad leaned closer, and his breath smelled faintly like the mint gum he always chews when he's nervous. "Do you want me to die because you want to be righteous?" he whispered. My throat tightened. That line, "Do you want to die?" was a familiar weapon. It wasn't new. Dad has always been good at turning your boundary into cruelty. "I want you to get care," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'm not committing insurance fraud. There are other options." Megan scoffed. "Like what?" "You think he can just other option his way in his surgery?" "Yes," I said, and I surprised myself by how calm I sounded. "Hospitals do payment plans. There's financial assistance. There are programs. We can talk to a social worker." Dad's jaw worked. "I don't want handouts," he snapped. I almost laughed. "You want my insurance?" I said, and the words were sharp before I could soften them. "That's a handout, Dad. You just want it in a way that makes you feel in control." Megan's voice rose. "You're unbelievable. After everything he did for you." I turned to her, and my patience finally snapped cleanly in half. "Like what?" I asked, quiet but deadly. "Name it. What did he do for me that you think makes me owe him this?" Megan blinked, thrown off because she's using me backing down in public. He raised you," she stammered. "He paid for." "He missed my graduation," I said, and I hated that my voice shook on the word. "He chose your recital. He told me I didn't need him there because I was mature. He took you to lessons and recitals and competitions and told me to be understanding because you were sensitive." Dad's face hardened. "We're not doing this," he snapped. "No," I said. "We are. Because you don't get to show up now with your hand out and pretend we have the kind of relationship where you could demand things from me." A nurse walked past us then, pushing a wheelchair, and glanced at the tension like she was evaluating whether she'd need security. I forced myself to lower my volume again. "I will help you," I said, looking at Dad. "I will sit with the social worker. I will help you fill out paperwork. I will help you figure out a plan. But I'm not giving you my insurance card, so you can pretend you're me." Dad's eyes went watery, and for a second I thought I saw fear, real fear, under the anger. Then he did what he always does when he feels powerless. He went mean. "You've always been selfish," he said, quietly, like he was delivering a fact. "You've always thought you were better than this family." Megan nodded along, like she'd been waiting to hear it. That hurt more than I wanted it to. Not because I believed it, but because it was the same old story they told themselves to justify treating me like I mattered less. If I was selfish, then they didn't have to face the way they took from me. I swallowed hard. "I'm not better," I said. "I'm just done." Dad's hand dropped finally. He looked exhausted suddenly, like the fight had drained the adrenaline that was keeping him upright. "So what?" he said, voice flat. "You're going to leave me?" "No," I said, and this was the hardest part. "I'm not leaving you. I'm changing the terms." Megan snorted. "Terms," she muttered. Listen to her, like she's negotiating a contract. Maybe I was. Maybe that was the only way I could survive loving people who kept trying to turn love into leverage. We sat down with the hospital social worker an hour later. Dad sulked the whole time, arms crossed, refusing to answer questions until the social worker asked me directly, and I had to say, "I'm not sure," because I don't know his finances. Because he never told me. Because he didn't see me as someone he needed to be honest with. Just someone he could call when things went wrong. Megan kept chiming in with half information and dramatic sighs. "He worked his whole life," she'd say. "He shouldn't have to beg." The social worker, bless her, didn't react. She just kept typing, calm as stone, asking about income, assets, coverage, last enrollment, missed payments. That's when it came out, in these reluctant little admissions. Dad let his supplemental plan lapse. He missed a deadline. He ignored mail because it stressed him out. Megan said she thought he handled it. Dad said Megan was supposed to remind him. They circled blame like it was a comfort blanket. I sat there listening, and the feeling in my chest was weirdly familiar. It was the same feeling I had at 22 in my cap and gown, realizing that no matter how much I did right, I could still be the one who got sacrificed for Megan's comfort. The social worker laid out options. Financial assistance, a payment plan, a possible interim coverage route. It wasn't instant. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. It was legal. It was a path. Dad didn't thank her. He didn't thank me. He just muttered, "This is humiliating." And I wanted to say, Imagine how humiliating it was to watch you clap for Megan while my graduation gown wrinkled on a chair at home, but I didn't. I didn't because it wouldn't change him. It would just feed the fight. When we left the office, Megan cornered me near the vending machines. Her face was tight, angry in that way that always looks like righteousness on her. "You embarrassed him," she hissed. "You could have just helped quietly." "I did help," I said. Quietly would have meant committing fraud in a corner, so you two could pretend this was normal. Megan's eyes narrowed. "You don't care about him," she said. "You care about punishing him." I stared at her, and in that moment, I saw something I'd been avoiding for years. Megan genuinely believes this family exists to serve her emergencies. Dad taught her that. Dad rewarded it. And she was going to keep demanding it until someone stopped. "I care enough to do this the right way," I said. "And I care enough about myself to not burn my life down to make yours easier." Megan's mouth opened, then closed. "Whatever," she snapped. "Don't come crying to me when you regret this." I didn't answer. I walked back down the hall toward Dad's room, and each step felt heavy, but also clean, like my body was finally matching what my brain had known for a long time. Dad was sitting up in bed when I got there, hospital gown gaping at the collar, TV on mute. He looked smaller than I remembered, not because he'd shrunk, but because the hospital strips everyone down to the truth. You're a person in a bed, dependent on other people's competence. He looked at me, and for once he didn't have an insult ready. He just looked tired. "You really won't do it," he said quietly. Not a question, a statement. "No," I said. He stared at the blanket. His jaw tightened. "I didn't think you were that kind of person," he muttered. I felt a sad little laugh rise, and I swallowed it down. "I'm exactly the kind of person you made me," I said. "The one who handles things. The one who fixes messes. The one who doesn't get to fall apart." Dad's eyes flicked up. For a second, there was something like recognition. Then it slipped away, like it scared him. He cleared his throat. "Your graduation," he said, and my whole body went alert. "That was a long time ago." "It was," I said. He nodded, like he was building courage. "I thought you didn't care," he admitted, voice rough. "You didn't make a fuss." I stared at him. My hands were cold. "I cared," I said. "I just learned early that making a fuss didn't change anything." Dad swallowed. He looked away. "Megan needed me," he said, defaulting to the old justification like it was an automatic script. I exhaled slowly. "I needed you too," I said. Silence filled the room. The TV flickered. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed too loudly, then stopped. Dad's eyes were wet again, but he didn't wipe them. "So what now?" he asked, and his voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Now," I said, "we follow the plan. We do paperwork. We do appointments. And Megan can help too. Not just show up to blame me. Actually help." He didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. That felt like progress in the saddest way. I stayed another hour, long enough to make sure he ate something, long enough to write down the social worker's numbers, long enough to remind him, firmly, what the next steps were. Then I left because I have a job and kids and a life, and part of my boundary is not abandoning my own world to fix the one Dad neglected. On the drive home, I kept thinking about that empty seat at graduation. Not because I'm stuck in the past, but because it was the first time I saw the truth clearly. Dad's love came with conditions, and the condition was always that Megan came first. I spent years trying to earn my way into equal treatment, like it was a promotion you could achieve with hard work. Now he needs me, and the part of me that still wants a dad, still wants that simple, uncomplicated bond, keeps whispering, if you save him, maybe he'll finally see you. But I'm old enough now to know better. People don't rewrite their values because you rescue them. They either do the work to change or they don't. And the only thing you control is whether you keep sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's favoritism. So I'm helping him. Legally. Practically. With boundaries that protect my life. And if that makes me this selfish daughter in their story, fine. I spent my whole 20s trying to be the understanding one. I'm not doing that for the rest of my life.